All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We will be doing the Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. This is specifically preparing all the students who are DACA recipients who will be departing soon to study abroad. So this presentation, as I mentioned, is specifically for DACA students who will be going to study abroad or who are thinking about studying abroad in the near future and want further information about what we typically ask students to prepare upon going abroad and then also returning. The DACA Pre-Departure Preparedness presentation will provide you with updates of DACA. And it would also provide you with legal resources and information for students who will be re-entering the United States. Before we get started, we want to thank our campus collaborators within the UC system, including UCEAP. And as a reminder, this series is a collaborative effort between all the University of California campuses and UCAP to provide identity-based study abroad workshops, panels, and information sessions for students across the UC system. Towards the end, I will have a bit.ly link for all of you in case you want to explore other of our session topics, some of them including for first-gen students, accommodations or disabilities abroad, as well as for our LGBTQIA+ students who wish to study abroad. Before we get started, we want to do our land acknowledgement. The International Education Office at UCLA acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. So prior to the presentation, I would like to introduce our presenters for today. My name is Jacqueline Tafoya. I am the UCLA Study Abroad Intake Advisor. And today I will be managing the Q&A. So please feel free to use that function and ask any questions or concerns you may have throughout the presentation. Again, I will be monitoring it. And then towards the end, we will have those Q&As answered. Our two presenters today are Daisy Perez and Gina Petch. And I will go ahead and let them introduce themselves and get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's a pleasure to be here today. Like she said, my name is Daisy Perez, and I'm a paralegal with the Undocumented Student Program at UCLA and the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center. I work very closely with Gina to support the undocumented community that's at UCLA.
Hi, my name is Gina, and I'm the staff attorney here at UCLA as a part of the UC Immigrant Legal Service Center. I work with Daisy, and we work on a lot of different cases, litigious fellas, and a lot more recently on advanced parole through DACA. So it's a pleasure to be here and speak to you. During this presentation, we will be talking about 3 different topics: pre-departure before you leave on your trip for DACA, under study abroad for DACA through advanced parole, a little bit of tips for during your trip, and then what to expect upon returning. And before we get started, I just wanted to point out and give a disclaimer that this is not legal advice, this is just informational. And as we are getting started, I did want to reach out and give a bit of a DACA update. As we all know, DACA is up in the air right now, but there has been not too many changes since the Supreme Court decision. And we did want to go over and give a couple of dates of what's going on at the moment. In July 16th of 2021, Judge Hannon did issue a decision declaring the 2012 DACA memo as unlawful, and he stopped processing initial DACA requests. This 2012 DACA memo is the policy that was enacted under Obama in 2012. So just to give you a little bit of clarification, this is different than what happened last year in August of 2022, where DHS issued the final DACA rule. This DACA rule replaced the 2012 DACA memo, and it was issued and finalized as of October 31st, 2022. However, during this time, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals declared the 2012 DACA memo as unlawful, basically affirming the previous 2021 decision. However, they sent it back to the lower court to review this new rule. So at the moment, this lower court is issuing deadlines for briefing regarding the 2022 DACA final rule. So what does this all mean? Basically, it's just the same thing. The initial DACA requests are currently halted, unfortunately, but if you do have DACA already, you can still renew, and you can also apply for advanced parole. And so now we are here to talk a little bit more about what to expect on your trip under advanced parole.
Thanks for the updates, Gina. So I know we said this presentation is geared towards DACA-based advanced parole, but I do want to acknowledge that advanced parole is available to other categories of immigrants too, including people who have TPS, URT visa status, or pending an adjustment of status application. The pre-departure checklist for you as DACA recipients that are traveling with advanced parole is going to look a little different from immigrants in those other categories. So before you depart on your trip, you'll want to make sure that you have all the documents you need in order to return. And we'll go over what those documents are in the next slide. We encourage you to make copies of the documents that you need and leave a copy with someone in the US, whether that's a family member or a trusted friend, just in case your documents are lost while you're traveling and you need to access a copy. We also highly recommend that if you will be flying, that you pack your documents in your carry-on bag that you'll take on the plane with you. Unfortunately, we have seen situations where when the documents were packed in the check bag and the check bag was lost or misplaced by the airline. That's a very stressful situation to be in. And I mean, it's probably rare, but just to avoid the possibility of something like that happening to you, please do try to have those important documents on your person at all times until you reach your final destination. Once you arrive to where you'll be staying, keep the documents in a safe location until you're ready to leave. A few other considerations worth noting as far as coordinating your return and departure. You'll have already, oh, sorry. My screen glitched for a second. Yeah, so, as far as coordinating your return or departure, whether that's by plane or through the land border, it's just an important reminder that you can't leave any earlier than or return any later than the date you were approved for on your advance parole document. When you're booking your flights, or if you're driving and you're planning your drive through the land border, you want to make sure that you are traveling within the days that you're authorized to travel, and also just giving yourself enough time to return. So ideally, you want to have maybe a buffer of 5 to 7 days, just in case of a flight delay or sudden illness. If you travel outside of the authorized days, you do risk not being able to re-enter the US and possibly losing your DACA. So it's very, very important to be mindful of the dates, the approved dates on your advanced parole document when planning your travel. If you'll be departing the US by flight, we recommend that you book a nonstop flight to your destination if that's at all possible. Alternatively, if there are no direct flights available, try to book one that either has the layover in the US or a layover in another country that you're approved to travel to. If you're on a flight that has a layover, the best practice is to remain at the airport for the entirety of the layover until you can board your connecting flight. So another consideration we had was about checking visa requirements for other countries. So that's something you might have already discussed with your EAP advisor, but just a reminder that other countries have different visa requirements. So you'll want to make sure that in addition to carrying the documents you need for your advanced parole, you have any other documentation you might need in order to be admitted to the countries you're traveling to. If you have questions about those visa requirements, do connect with your EAP advisor. And then for some final tips, plan ahead, and again, give yourself enough time to get to where you need to be, especially if you're flying and need to go through TSA. Right now, the recommended time frame to arrive before an international flight is about 3 hours. If you worked with an attorney on your advanced parole case, make sure that you have their contact information or business card and share it with your relative or friend in the US who can reach out to them in case of an emergency. If you completed your application on your own, I encourage you to schedule an appointment with the UC Immigrant Legal Services attorney that's on your campus so that you're aware of the dates so that they are aware of the dates that you will be traveling, and also so that you have their information in case of an emergency. If it's possible, try to book your flights or plan your return within the normal business hours. Gina, I'm sure, can attest, but an attorney is more likely to respond to your call if it's at 3:30 on a Thursday versus at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so here we have the list of documents you'll need to carry and make copies of ahead of your travel. Make sure to confirm that you have all of these before you leave, and also encourage you to review the contents of the documents to make sure that all your information is correct on them. So first, you'll need to have your valid passport, and that should be valid for at least 6 months after your expected return date. So that means, for example, if you're traveling in June this year and you'll be returning in September, your passport should be valid until at least March 2024. If you need to renew your passport, you should do that as soon as possible before you leave the US. You'll need to have your approved advanced parole travel document, which is called the Form I-512L, Authorization for Parole. This is the document that has the dates you're approved to travel for, and also the countries you're approved to travel to. So you should review that extra carefully as well while you're finalizing your travel plans. You should also carry with you evidence of the reason for your trip. So for most of you, it looks like the reason is going to be educational study abroad. So evidence of that purpose would be the acceptance letter you received from UCEAP, if you have it, proof of enrollment in the university abroad, etc. You should have your current valid DACA work permit, and do make sure your card is valid, not just when you're leaving, but also while you're abroad and when you're going to be returning. If your card is going to expire during your study abroad, it'd be a good idea to submit a renewal before you leave. You'll need to bring along as well a copy of your most recent DACA approval notice. That should have been included with your advanced parole filing, so hopefully you have that available, and again, pack it with the documents you'll need to bring. If you can't find your approval notice, but you submitted your previous DACA renewal with an attorney, you can reach out to the attorney's office for a copy of the approval notice. If you have one, please also bring with you your valid state-issued ID or driver's license. And reiterating one of the tips from the previous slide, pack and bring a copy of your attorney's business card. Next slide.
Thank you, Daisy. So as far as during your study abroad trip, there are a couple of things that you should keep in mind while you're on your study abroad trip. And the first is to be on your best behavior while abroad. I like to say you can have fun, but don't have too much fun while you're out there, because whatever your actions are abroad, it can have an effect on, for example, when you're coming back inside the United States. A story that I like to say, it happened to a past client of mine where they went abroad, they had a little bit too much fun, and they actually got into a bar fight where they were detained abroad. Once they tried to come back into the United States, they were put into secondary for a very, very long time while they were trying to figure out whether or not they had an arrest warrant or what was going on. And we didn't know on our end what was going on because we were not told about, his night out where he had a little bit too much fun. So just make sure that you're careful, make sure that you're on your best behavior, and just to be aware of what the rules are in the country that you're studying. Sometimes, for example, here in California, marijuana is legal. However, it might not be legal abroad. If that's something that you wanted to look into, you should just still be on your best behavior and avoid all of those kinds of things. Also, to be aware of any social media posts If you are posting something where you're, having a little bit too much fun, it can come back, and an ICE officer, consular officer, once you're coming back in, may see that, or they may be aware of it. They can look or ask to look at something that you've posted. So just be careful of what you're posting while you're abroad. The next bit of advice is not to travel to any countries outside of your study abroad program or what you were approved for. Sometimes while you're on your study abroad program, there are one-day excursions. It might be outside of what your scope was on your advanced parole document. So make sure that you are aware of the fact that you should not travel to any countries outside of what was already authorized to you. And then the last bit of advice is to be careful of yourself, your belongings, and most importantly, your documents. My recommendation is that once you get to your destination, that you keep your advanced parole documents, your passport, all of those things in a very secure place, and make sure that you know where it is at all times. You do need your original document to return back into the US. And when I say be careful of your belongings and make sure that you know where they are, this has happened to me beforehand, where a client actually went to Mexico, and it sounds weird, but a dog bit and almost destroyed his advanced parole document. Luckily, he was able to come back in because it wasn't too bad, but he was given issues because his original document was a little bit torn up. So again, be careful of your documents yourself and your belongings. Next slide. Now, upon returning, it's very important that you have all of your documents ready to go. Again, make sure that you keep your documents on you while you're returning, making sure that they are in your carry-on, not in your checked bag, and making sure that you have all of that ready to go once you get to the airport or to come back on your return flight. Once you are back in the US, you will go through customs, so be prepared to answer questions during customs. And after you answer those questions, make sure that you have your advanced parole document stamped. And I know one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what are they going to ask me when I'm coming back? Next slide. So while I can't tell you exactly what they're going to ask you, these are kind of a bit of an overview of questions that the ICE officers or the Border Patrol officers can ask you. First are biographical questions. So what is your name? When is your birth date? What country were you born in? Those kinds of things are typical questions that can come up. The next thing that they can ask you are immigration or kind of criminal history questions. Have you ever been arrested? What status do you have? Do you have DACA? Do you have TPS? Things like that. The most common question is, what was your reason for your trip abroad? So for you, most of you would be that I went on my study abroad trip. I went to visit X country, and then this is what I studied. How long were you out of the country? How long were you gone? Which countries did you visit? Sometimes they'll ask you, where did you stay when you were abroad? And where do you reside in the US, or where are you coming to or returning back to the US? So if that's to LA, is it to Santa Barbara, wherever you're coming from, they may ask you where you're coming back into. And this is just kind of a little bit of the questions that they can ask you. Apart from that, I would just advise and make sure that you are calm and collected, and making sure that you are just answering the questions that they are asking you. If they ask you, for example, what is your name? You can just say, hey, my name is Gina. You don't have to tell them how you got your name, or that, oh, my dad named me because he liked this model named Gina, or whatever it is. You just have to answer the question, whatever it is that they're asking you.
Thank you, Gina, for the information. Yeah, I'll reiterate that as part of our final tips. Definitely try to remain calm through the process. I hope that after the presentation, you feel a little bit more knowledgeable and prepared for what you can expect when you return. Gina just went over a few different types of questions, right, that you might be asked, but they may be phrased differently, or like she said, they might not even be asked at all by the officer who's screening you. So like she said, listen carefully, definitely respond truthfully, and don't volunteer any information that they're not asking of you. It might be a long wait time, particularly if you're landing at a smaller airport that's not accustomed to DACA advanced parole travelers. But if you have your documents with you and you follow the recommendations here, ideally you shouldn't face any issues. And then the last tip is to make sure that you keep all of your original advanced parole documents somewhere safe for future use. Your advanced parole document, again, the form I-512L, might be stamped when you come in, as well as your passport. If you're entering through one of the land borders, you might be given a physical I-94 card. Keep all of these for your record somewhere safe, and make copies. You're going to need those documents to update your last entry information on your future DACA renewals. And you might also need those documents in a future immigration application, for example, like in an adjustment of status. Next slide. Perfect. So we're concluding here with just sharing some links to a few institutional and also external resources that we encourage you all to check out, both before and after you return from your study abroad. I want to highlight the Immigrants Rising link. They have a very comprehensive guide on traveling with advanced parole, a lot of more pre-departure tips. They also have a lot of testimonials. So people talking about their experiences preparing, how they felt while they were abroad, and also their experience coming back in. So those might be helpful, again, as you're preparing for your own travel. Also going to take a second to plug our center, UCIMM, as another great resource that you should make full use of if you haven't already. The center provides free and direct immigration legal services to undocumented students and the immediate family members of undocumented students across most of the UC campuses, with the exception of Berkeley. Our staff is available to support with a range of services, from initial intake screenings, which would be like a consultation, to full scope representation in cases like Gina mentioned, DACA renewals, a lot of advanced parole, family petitions, and different kinds of humanitarian relief. Our website that's listed there has a page that includes campus-specific resources. So if you're not from UCLA, for example, you can find information for your particular campus and also information on how to schedule an appointment with your respective campus attorney. So please check it out if you have not already. Next slide.
Thank you, Daisy and Gina. So we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. The first one is, can we laminate our documents?
So unfortunately, no, you cannot laminate your documents. You're actually not supposed to change or alter your documents. So you do not laminate your document. Just try to keep it in a safe place while you're studying abroad. And to keep it flat, I believe that you're not also supposed to try to fold it. So you do have to keep it maybe in a folder, kind of like a plastic folder or something like that, so that they're all straight and not tampered with or changed.
Thank you, Gina. The other question is, when returning, do they keep our advanced parole documents or do we keep it?
So you would keep it, you're just going to show it to the officer. Ideally, they would stamp it on the corner. I think it's the right corner, with their stamp, and then they would give it back to you. If you have a copy of it with you, ideally they would stamp both the original and the copy.
Sorry, just to add to that, we have heard situations where the officer tries to keep the document. So if you feel comfortable, definitely advocate for yourself. Let them know that you're going to need the document back. If they're not going to give you the document, then try to take a photo of your document with their stamp before you leave the airport.
Thank you. And then another question is, So the student, her program ends at least a week prior to the approved dates. Can they leave, or should they leave, or are they able to stay there until the last day of their approved dates?
So we actually recommend coming back maybe 2 or 3 days before the end of your approval date. The reason that we say that, or at least that I've advised that in the past, is because there are times where you have a flight booked maybe for the day of, and maybe that flight gets canceled, changed, delayed, and then you're going to be stuck there after your after the last day of approval. So try to make sure that if you are going to stay a little bit after your program, but a little bit before your approved date, that you're coming in at maybe 2 days before the end date. So just to give a little bit of leeway in case that happens where your flight's booked, or you need to rebook your flight, or you have a later flight.
So students, as a reminder, you can use the Q&A right now. This is still part of the Q&A portion. So if there's not any other questions you have, we will be concluding soon. So please use this time to do the Q&A. Otherwise, as we mentioned the previous slide, there are various resources that you can use. So always reach out to your own campus legal services center if you have one. Otherwise, you can use the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center website to find who your campus attorneys might be. If there are no any questions, then we will go ahead and conclude. Thank you again for joining us today. As a reminder, this has been a part of the DEI series in collaboration with all of the UC campuses. As I mentioned earlier, I do have the bit link down here on the bottom left-hand side. If you go onto that bit.ly link, you will be able to see various presentations that prior UC campuses have hosted, including an LGBTQIA+ presentation of first generation, Asians and Pacific Islanders abroad as well. We do have a last question. If this recording will be available, yes, it will actually be on that website where that bit.ly link is. We will be sending it out to all students who have also registered for the presentation. Otherwise, again, you can find it on the UCEAP website for the DEI series presentations. Thank you so much to Daisy and Gina for giving us all of this valuable information. We wish you the luck within your study abroad programs. We hope you have an amazing time, and we already spoke about things to consider, but we hope that you are able to share with us about your study abroad experience, and we hope you have a great time. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, and thank you again, Daisy and Gina.